Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Overview and Scrutiny Performance and Growth September. It's great to see you again after the summer, and I'm sure you're all raring to go. Before we start, I'm going to make some changes, if it's okay with everyone, on the agenda. I'm going to bring some items up the agenda to allow a bit more time for discussion. Well, it's got a very long agenda, and we'll see how we get through this agenda as we move forward. So without further ado, let's start. Apologies.
Chair, we have an apology from Councillor Corney.
Thank you. Minutes of last meeting. Councillor Blackwell.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I have just what highlighted, which may be a typo, but Councillor Gardner, did he surmise or summarise? Summarise. Did you summarise?
Let me just check that.
It's 21, page 8. A minute.
I read that and I thought.
What did I do?
Yes, Councillor.
This is regarding basically what I had said on the Regeneration Opportunities Report 22. If you could please add, when I spoke about the 1 million being given to a private company, what I meant was when this could be spent on the council's own assets, referring to St Neots, what was failed to be put in was not just St Neots, but St Neots Riverside Paths as an example. So if we could add Riverside Paths to that, which is Regeneration Opportunity Report 22 on the draft minutes. Thank you.
Councillor Catman.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to say, I was present, but remotely. I noticed I speak in it, but I'm not in the list of attendees.
We'll get that fixed. Tony, you pick that. Lovely, thank you. Yes.
So sorry, and I know we've got a long agenda, but please could I be referred to as Vice Chair within the minutes as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Members' interests. No members' interests, thank you. Item 3, Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme.
You've got the notice of key and executive decisions, and there's one item on there, and that's already included in the programme. So in the committee's own work programme, there is a new item for next month, the transformation approach and plan. The November meeting is the same as reported at the last meeting. And then under the unscheduled agenda items, the last 6 items are new items.
Are there any comments on? Yes, Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chair. Unsurprisingly, parking strategy, I recognise that it's in the unscheduled agenda items, but considering how it was discussed at both council and in other forums, how important this is, considering it's now saying they won't be coming to us until spring 26, I think is very disappointing, especially as CPE has now started, and some of the concerns that I had in regards to the changing in fees hasn't been implemented, even though it was a decision of council. So very disappointed that this seems to be delayed in comparison to the timelines that we've been told in the past.
Yes, through yourself, Chair, just in response to that point, noting that we've put that in there as the long time scale for it. We'll try and bring it further forward if we can do so. I am pleased to say that the tender exercise for that parking strategy has recently been completed, and we're in the cooling off period for that before we can get on and actually do it. So we're really hopeful that it'll be able to start and take place this month and commence that piece of work. So if we can bring it through the process, and there is member engagement, I believe, embedded within the parking strategy refresh work. So hopefully there'll be some oversight of the work as it starts to develop, and if we can bring it forward sooner, we will do so.
Can we have an update on that, perhaps, at the next meeting on that? Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, on page 25, unscheduled agenda items, we talk about engagement with parishes and residents with regard to ease of submitting responses. As we're going to be doing the latest round of consulting with parishes, I would have thought that should really be on the October agenda, because we need to know precisely how we're going to engage with our parishes going forward for the local plan. And as that's going out at the end of October, as I'm led to believe, about October the 28th, it would seem logical to me that we should be coming, at least something should be said at that particular meeting, so that all councillors here could have the chance to look at it before we go out to ask parishes for their, in the consultation process, the next round of consultation for the local plan, particularly with the problems we had previously.
Through yourself, Chair, if I may remind members, we did go through the exercise of looking at how successful the previous consultation exercise was following the last exercise, and that was pre the summer recess. So I think, Councillor Taylor, in terms of the approach that you're suggesting, that almost seems like we're revisiting and reduplicating the work that we're done before. I'm quite happy to revisit what we said in relation to engagement with parishes and responses.
I'm not asking you to revisit. What I'm asking you to do is just to come back to the next panel meeting in October and explain to members precisely how the engagement will work, so that all members know, or members on this panel know precisely how it's going to work for the next round of engagement with parishes, just so that we're all clear. That's really what I want to see. Thank you, Chair.
Noting the point, Councillor Taylor, I think it's one that we can pick up through written correspondence, because actually I think we covered exactly that under the previous meeting in terms of how we're going to do the engagement approach. So leave it with me. We'll respond offline, and if we need to, we can always bring it back.
Okay. So item 4, outstanding responses. There you've quite a few responses, and I think there were some late submissions as well. Is everyone happy with those responses, or any comments? No, are we happy with those? No further comments. Shall we move on? Now, at this point, obviously we've got quite a long agenda, and in order to make it work for everyone, I thought it would be helpful if we actually just moved some of the items. So I was we were suggesting, or it's been proposed, that the commercial investment strategy be brought further up the agenda so we can actually discuss that sooner, and then obviously look at the corporate performance reports subsequently. But I suggest we go to the corporate peer challenge now and then go on to the commercial investment strategy, if that's okay with everyone. Is okay? Lovely, thank you. Let's do a corporate challenge update. Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Conboy.
Good evening. Doesn't want to play. There we are. Good evening, members. It's very nice to see you all. Very pleased to bring the latest update on the Corporate Peer Challenge. You'll remember that this is all about us being a learning organisation. We welcomed the Peer Challenge colleagues to come and see us. We've already given you a number of updates, so you know the progress that we have been making, and this is the latest iteration just to bring you up to speed. And obviously, I'm going to hand across to Neil Sloper, who'll walk you through some of the detail, but then very happy to take any questions or comments or observations. But really pleased with the progress we're making. But that said, it's still work in progress because that's actually what a good organisation does. So I'll hand across to Neil if that's okay.
Welcome, Neil.
Good evening. So this is the latest quarterly report, covers the period April to June. The peer challenge links to the corporate plan objective of core work well, and corporate plan action 60 is actually to implement the recommendations and suggestions to drive transparent, continuous improvement, so hence the report. In summary, the actions are split into formal recommendations and then suggestions. This council decided to take on all of those recommendations. So as it stands, we currently have 5 out of 27 actions associated with the formal recommendations left on the list to do. And in terms of the suggestions, we've got 4 out of 10 left to do. The number of actions related to suggestions did increase by 3 when the interim review from the LGA took place. They commented on progress and came up with a few more suggestions, and again we took them in full. So the progress on those outstanding actions is set out in Appendix 1, pages 5 to 9. So I wasn't proposing to go through those in a degree of detail. Most of the actions are due to finish by the end of this month, September. So when the Q2 report comes to you, it will reflect that and possibly make some recommendations in terms of further reporting because of that status. But just open to any questions or any extra information the panel would like.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. And it's great to see the progress that's been made. My question's a bit of an introspective one, but it's about the scrutiny process. So on page 58, the evidence that's presented says that reflection on the training has resulted in an agreed overview and scrutiny process map for how topics are requested, considered, and decided upon for future work programmes. From the perspective of a panel member, I'd say we haven't really seen any difference in how items are coming forward for scrutiny. So I wondered if you could just comment a little bit on the actual impact of that training and how we see that having worked through the scrutiny process, because I don't think we're seeing it really from this end of the process.
Thank you. So it's a really, really helpful question. And I think it's one that we probably will want to explore perhaps a little bit offline, because the answer is we provided the training for panel members to enable you as members to own the scrutiny process, to bring forward items, to request items. Now, I've seen some of that live this evening, because I've seen the challenge about, well, it's on the pending list and I'd like it to come forward. So that bit's working. If you feel that there are things that you would like to come forward and you're either not able to ask for them or you're not clear what you could be asking for, that's the sort of thing we want to continue that discussion. Training is never a one-off thing. It's designed to enable and start a discussion. If we haven't yet moved into that space where every member around this table feels that they can bring something forward and say, I really would like that to come on the scrutiny list, that's the place we want to be. We want you to be able to scrutinise the things that you think are important. We want you to be able to own that agenda. It's your agenda. It's not the administration's agenda. It's not my agenda. It's not the Cabinet's agenda. It's your agenda. So we'd be very happy to pick that up outside of the meeting because we really want you to be in that position. If you can think of things that would enable that to work better, then the answer is we're all ears. And I keep saying that at every opportunity. You know, it's your scrutiny. You tell us what would make it work better, work smoother, be more effective. We want to enable that to happen. So thank you for the question. I very much hope that we might have further conversations. So maybe that's a session perhaps with overview and scrutiny outside of this meeting.
Thank you. I think it's less about enabling items to come forward that we want to come forward, but it's maybe about reducing the quantity of other things that are on the agenda. So if you look at tonight's agenda, for example, I mean, Kath already referenced the quantity of items on the agenda, and the report pack was nearly 500 pages. So that doesn't really give any space for any further items to come forward, or even for us to properly scrutinise the items that are on the agenda. So I think it's more an issue of filtering out the quantity of stuff that's already on there to give us more space to scrutinise perhaps the things that we want to bring forward.
If I may, Chair, thank you. I think that's really helpful to understand. And there will be some things that we suggest you scrutinise because actually that's part of good governance. And there will be some things you might well say to us, actually, we don't wish to scrutinise that. So again, let's please have that dialogue. Equally, I'm mindful that officers work very, very hard to try and equip you with as much information as you need. I sit on boards too. Sometimes I get the same volume as you and I look at it and I think, oh my goodness. But actually officers, if they get the feedback about what's useful and when, hopefully the covering reports are sufficient much of the time, and the background documentation might be the thing you need to refer to if you want to go back and look at detail. But be really happy to pick that up with you because we need to make really sound decisions, and the fact that we have pre-scrutiny is not all councils have that. I thought it was very normal. It isn't. I'm really pleased we have it, but we'd like to make it so it's really effective for you, as well as really adding to the scrutiny process in terms of governance. So happy to take that away. I'm sure officers will be happy to think about how they might produce perhaps less content, but in a way that is actually terribly useful for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just an overview comment first and then a question to follow. Councillor Conway, thank you very much for the report. I'm glad to see this come forward again. I think it's important, as I said all the way along, that there's political oversight of how this really big piece of work is being implemented. But in your opening remarks, you mentioned that this is a continuous programme, that we're continuing to improve, that we're always moving forwards. But actually, when you read the actions within the report, that doesn't show that it's continuous. It shows that something has happened and it stops and it's done. It'd be useful to know what is the continued improvement that's taking place within each of these areas. And just to give the example, recommendation 1, the last update was March this year. Recommendation 2, March this year and December last year. 3, December last year. 4, March this year. I can keep going through, I'm not going to. The way this reads is that it's a one and done. Once this action has been completed, we're finished. Now, I know that isn't the case. It'd be useful for that to be in here to say, this is what we're doing, these are the updates that we've been making, these are tweaks that have happened, and these are the success stories that has come out the other end of it. It'd be useful to know that, and also what didn't work so well and what we've done to change it, I think would be really useful. The more specific question that I have is in regards to recommendation 1, which is shown as complete. So I reread the initial peer review, And even in the recommendation, it talks about the alignment of finance as well as workforce. But all the action points on this are to do with workforce. It's aligning senior leadership, it's making sure that our heads of services are in the right place. There's nothing in there about aligning our finances to the political priorities of the joint administration. And we haven't had a report that's come to us that really shows that either. So I'm wondering how you're able to show us and residents how the joint administration are prioritising their finances and their funding to the priorities of the council, whether that's the three missions or the 5 pathways or the it's the 5 journeys and the umpteen pathways that they come along. At no point have we seen the joint administration say we're piling more resource into this because this is our priority. We haven't seen that, where we have seen the alignment of workforce. So how are we going to find out how you are aligning the finances to your political priorities?
If I may, Chair, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Some really helpful feedback. Certainly we'll take away the first thing about how we come back. I think the challenge is we do a process. If we don't come back in time to close it out, you'll then say, well, we never got to the end of it. But I like the idea that we can come back and say, and possibly as part of almost the closing out of it, this is what we've embedded, this is what's built in as work going forward. This is actually finished because actually that doesn't have a forward trajectory, because actually you do it once, it doesn't need a forward trajectory, but other things will. And I really like the idea of being able to celebrate some of those successes, because there are some really lovely successes. So I'll talk to colleagues about how we might do that, reflecting Councillor Pickering's comment about not giving you onerous reports, but we'll look at how we might share that with you. The alignment of finances, again, I'll take that back. I think that's a valid point in the sense of it wasn't on the original list, so effectively we're adding a new task, but actually I think we can tell you that story. So let me take that back. I don't want to commit officers into sort of, how quickly they'll be able to turn that round for you, but we do have that information, so I'm sure we should be able to bring something back to you, but let me work with officers on timings. But I think that's a really powerful way of explaining what we're doing and what we're prioritising. I think we see it in full council, but we probably don't articulate it back in these kind of reports. So let me take that away and talk with officers and see what we can do.
Thank you. Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on recommendation 7, CPC 023. Sorry, it's a bit echoey. Future agendas are now published ahead of time, and this has been marked complete. I didn't see any change in the issuing of this agenda, particularly as the Chair has alluded to, it is a heavy one, and 1 working day would have meant that it had been published ahead of the bank holiday and probably benefited quite a few people who had an enormous amount to read in a shorter time. Thank you.
I'd like to, I was actually given a pre-agenda and some of the items have increased on that, which has led to why we've got quite a heavy agenda now. So I have actually seen that, Anne. So I am more than happy. I think that's reasonable to actually share that with other members. So I can probably look in to see whether we can share that. So that's perhaps my action there to take that away. Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. I think mine's a little bit off field on this, but I do have to wonder why when we're doing a corporate peer challenge to improve the systems and how we're working, I can't see anything in there. I wonder why we haven't got anything in there which addresses the fact that this particular council is up for election next year. The lifetime of the council beyond that is possibly 2 years, and other councils presumably are also going through corporate peer reviews and what have you, and their systems, their ways of working may be developing along different routes. And it seems to me that a lot of the work that's being done on this is all very well if you've got a lifetime, an unknown lifetime that's going to continue for some time in the future. But what we're doing is we're doing work as though there isn't going to be local government reorganisation, and we're trying to get things perfect. That's the end game, and we're not going to get them done in those timescales because it's an ongoing process, and we may be diversifying from what the other councils that will be part of the unitary are doing, or not going along the same lines. So it does concern me that local government reorganisation, which should really feature in everything that we do at the moment and planning for it, doesn't appear in the corporate peer review.
Thank you, Chair. Very good question, Councillor Chapman. So when the corporate peer challenge was set up and we invited our peers in, at that point we didn't know about local government reorganisation, so it wasn't something we knew was going to happen. So the peer challenge reflects the process we went through at that point, and the outcomes reflect that. But I do want to reassure you that actually all of the work that we're doing around the peer challenge will be beneficial to the new unitary authority when we are reorganised. It will be a new authority, but there will be a transition period where we're looking at systems and processes and integrating those from the partners that exist now into a new unitary. Now, some things will be new in a new unitary because you'd expect that, but there will be lots of systems and processes that will not change immediately overnight. They'll need to transfer. So the transferable ones, we need to get to the best place possible so that they are working optimally and they're doing what residents are going to need, because some of those things will have to be in operation for the new unitary until the new unitary can take it on. So we've looked at some of the other unitaries that have already reorganised. They are still running on legacy systems, maybe 3-4 years after reorganisation. Now, I very much hope the new unitary will not be in that position. Some of our peers have not taken the opportunity to have a peer review, and it's a really missed opportunity. The recommendation from the Local Government Association, if you like, from the sector, is that you do one of these on a really frequent rolling basis. Some of our partner organisations haven't done one in many years. So it should mean that Huntingdonshire's residents going forward are better placed because we've got systems that will roll forward that will benefit our residents. I am hoping it will equally influence a new unitary that has to merge systems by looking at what we're doing that is good and is recommended as best practice and can be picked up and adopted in that new unitary. So that's why it doesn't show in here. It's a really incredibly valid point, but everything we're doing actually is transferable into that new unitary.
I'm probably the only person here that was involved in the aftermath of the 1974 reorganisation. I say that with some confidence. And I can tell you my involvement was in 1976, and it was an absolute disaster then. And this council in 1987 employed Colin Meadowcroft as our legal officer, who then spent a year or two sorting out matters relating to local government reorganisation of 1974. So I don't think we can expect an easy ride, a seamless transgression. You know what I mean? Transition, not transgression.
Let's hope we learn from history. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up on the communication engagement strategy, more the point of the corporate narrative, which was completed December last year. So we've had good 8 months for this to come through. Also, we do have an additional action suggested by the peer review team in the March 2025. So just looking at that, which is page 63 of the whole agenda. So the revisit was March 2025 peer team revisit, and their additional suggestion was to produce short, punchy statements to accompany corporate narrative. And this is to be communicated to staff and members, and to use this narrative statement for internal and external communication. This has been produced and completed in June of this year. As far as I'm aware, I haven't seen it. I haven't even seen the corporate narrative based in anything. So quite often you see job adverts come through. I think I've seen it once in sections. I know it's a big piece of work, and that's why I understand this suggestion of punchy, narrative, which I don't think we've seen. I just want to understand, are we using it? Where are we using it? And can we see some examples of that? And also, can we actually see those short, punchy statements? Because I don't think we have yet.
Thank you, Chair. Brilliant question, not planted, can I just say, because we had a meeting with our comms lead today. You will see some of that coming through imminently. There is a brilliant campaign that is going to be coming through talking about all the things that this council has done. 52 members working collectively. So you are going to see some of that coming through in the coming couple of weeks. It's all around messaging those key things that we've been talking about in every corporate plan, in every discussion that we have, but it's actually about sharing them in bite-sized chunks that actually really work for social media and work with the press and work. So you will see those. We have been using them. We haven't given you, if you like, a list of them, but we have been using them to underpin, but you will see a campaign coming through. So wait for that. It's about to be released. You would have had an early briefing on it, probably as early as last night at the all members briefing, but we had a slightly more urgent message that we needed to communicate around a consultation piece. So apologies, it got bumped. It is coming. So look forward to seeing it, and I think you'll be pleased.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Catman.
Thank you, Chair. Not really a question, but just a comment. I'm always nervous when I see a plan like this and I suddenly realise we have loads of actions that were going to be finished last week or this week. And I think there are 8 or 9 that are all going to be happening now. It just worries me that are we really in a good position with that?
So yes, and you'll get that in the next update, because obviously this reflects the first 3 months of the year. It doesn't reflect the quarter 2. So we'll be looking to do the quarter 2 at the end of September, preparing that report, and it's scheduled in on the advanced schedule for this committee. So yes, those actions are happening. If you're referring to kind of the project management element of those things, we have teams actively working and rolling out that stuff. There's actually a briefing for all staff that we've been talking about in terms of the first stages of that as well. So a lot of that work is flowing through and has been flowing through during that August-September period. So it will be in the next update in terms of that. And we'll be honest, we've said already that there is a little bit of slippage on here with some of that stuff. But yes, that will be transparently presented with the quarter 2 update. But a lot of work has been taking place on that.
Are there any other questions on this paper before we move on? Okay. At this point, I'd like to deviate somewhat from the agenda and go to item 9, which is the CIS report and update. I think it's Mike's taking that, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Part of the reason that it's been bumped up is because Councillor Mickleborough is unwell, and so message to say, could I pick up the lead on this? I'm ably joined by Mike Gildersleeves, who will go through some of the detail. Really pleased to bring this to you. The commercial investment strategy underpins all of the thinking we do. I want to pay the previous administration credit. You know, you did a really good job on the work you've done. We are aiming to sort of continue that. This is a strategy document rather than an action plan. So this is that strategic framework that allows you then to make your decisions rather than we're going to do this today and that tomorrow. So hopefully it allows sufficient flexibility over time to be able to deliver and to respond to the changing circumstances. Certainly, I think it would be fair to say that when the original investment strategy was envisaged, we probably hadn't quite anticipated a world that we're now living in terms of some of the challenges around investments, some of the challenges around how the commercial markets are working that we're working within. So this is, if you like, the strategic view, but I'm going to hand across to Mike. We're happy to take any questions. I can't be Brett, but I will do my best to answer. And if there are things we need to come back to you outside of the meeting, I will give you my commitment to do so.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from that, I'm quite clearly not the Section 151 officer, Suzanne Jones, so I will do my best to present this item. So you've got the report before you, which provides the summary under background, Section 2. The original strategy dates from 2015. Yes, there's been some revisions to it, but a full review has not been undertaken since then. As part of the work to review the strategy, we've engaged CIPFA, who have done reviews of CISs and actually developed CIS strategies for other councils up and down the country. And the strategy has been through the Treasury and Capital Management Working Group. The strategy, as Councillor Conboy said, focuses on the principles and framework for the investments. It's not about looking at the current investment holdings. Are they doing well? Should we get rid of things? Should we hang on to things? That will be undertaken as part of our day-to-day business, as part of review of the assets and holdings that we have. And I think the final point there, Councillor Chapman's already alluded to the context that is moving in terms of local government reorganisation. So again, when the commitment's given to review the strategy, clearly there was a lack of knowledge about what was happening in terms of local government reform. We are aware of that and cognizant of that. So jumping to the strategy itself, I think it is objectively a very short document. It is not intended to be war and peace, and I think there is a need to just reiterate that this is to be read in conjunction with other strategies and documents that are available to the council. First and foremost, we're setting out the principles for the policy, which is to ensure that we're creating income from sources outside of our day-to-day operations. That then enables the council's reserves to be bolstered, as well as additional revenue, which in turn can be utilised to fund frontline services and other ambitions of members. As I say, it needs to be read alongside our general treasury management strategy, and we've, with CIPFA's help, we've ensured that it's aligned with various codes of practice and the Prudential Code, all of that's covered under Section 2. There is then the financial context, which I think the key bit for me isn't necessarily the table, which shows how our current CIS relates to our net revenue budget, but it is just to remember and reiterate to members that the CIS is one element of our overall financial strategy. There is the link to the Treasury Management Strategy, use of reserves, community infrastructure levy, etc., etc. So if we're thinking about investment in property, and I know I've heard it from members both in this chamber and others that say we want to invest in our local areas, in this case we've got a commercial investment strategy. The question is always, is that the right tool to use, or are there other tools to our toolkit to enable us to do that? So the guiding principles are quite clear. They are to look at, that our main investments will focus on built environment and largely comprise property, joint venture opportunities, and regeneration opportunities. And that there will be investment opportunities that may align with other strategies and requirements. So, for example, the overall corporate ambition to support economic growth. But the marker down under point 4 is that a guiding principle is that any such investment opportunity, say it's investment locally in something that might benefit local economy, it must still comply with the strategy. There are, within Section 4, the methodology there. So starting out looking at commercial viability, local impact, risk management, sustainability, divestment and timely decision making. They are key facets that you would find in any similar strategy. And I know there was a lot of discussion at the member workshop that we had around whether those were the right principles. So the strategy is set out as section 5. That primary driver being on focusing on achieving investment outcomes that promote revenue generation, and then beyond that, whether they generate benefits in terms of economic growth, asset optimization, sustainability and social value, risk management. Those factors being fairly similar to many commercial strategies that are utilised. Moving then on into governance. As I say, this isn't intended to create a whole level of additional bureaucracy. There is an existing Treasury and Capital Management Group as established by the Constitution. That board is essentially the governance board for this strategy. And you will see under that section there is reference to the ability for decisions to be made both by that group, but also recognising the role of the Section 151 officer, leader of the council, portfolio holders, for other urgent decisions as may be required. So again, that's just a reiteration, that section, of our existing constitutional requirements. In terms of the framework, I'm going to jump past section 7 because actually I think the key element is looking at the table, which is basically saying, first and foremost, revenue generation must be met. So that's the first guiding principle. And then we're looking for any investment strategy or investment proposal must then meet any one of the other investment activities, but it, as I say, must satisfy that revenue generation. So those will be the key factors when a business case is produced, along with then the expected benefits, returns, and everything else that you'd expect within the detailed business case, should those opportunities arise. And that is the end of the strategy. I think it is fair to say that the feedback we've had from CIPFA is that this covers everything that we need to do. They are, as I say, giving us that assurance in that matter. Building on the engagement with Scrutiny members, just going back over the engagement, members will recall the workshop that was held in April last year with various members of this committee and others were invited to that meeting. There was detailed discussion with CIPFA at that meeting, and then the version that is before you was developed in conjunction with the Treasury and Capital Working Group. And I will leave it there, Chair.
Thank you. I will, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for bringing the strategy. I understand it's not your subject matter, but I just have a couple of points really. One of them is about and I think it's right that everything should satisfy that revenue generation criteria, and then one of the others. But I'm a little bit confused about the one at the bottom of the list, which is risk level, because it doesn't really define. It almost leaves it as a catch-all that could just be anything else, really. And in fact, when you look at how the risk level is defined within the document, actually, I think all investments should be compliant with the council's agreed level of risk and governance processes, not just ones that are not caught out because they haven't picked up 2, 3, or 4 really in that list. So that was one point about that. And the second was about Section 7 governance, really. And I understand the Treasury and Corporate Management Group has the executive leader and the portfolio holder on it. But I don't see anywhere in the strategy, really, that talks about where this strategy would report back to either this panel or potentially the corporate governance panel as a wider group of members being involved.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take the first one. So you're absolutely right that the risk level needs to be considered in any business case that we bring forward. I think if I recall the discussion, it was about that there may be some opportunities where the council may wish to take or accept a higher degree of risk relative to the returns that would then be generated. So hence the inclusion of risk level in there is in my understanding, the basis for that investment activity. So there might be some activities that we say, actually, locally it might be high risk, but the rewards are acceptable and they're also balanced by economic and social value in the local area. So that's how that might all play through. But if you need further clarity on that, I'm happy to get that from you when Suzanne returns. In terms of the governance approach, clearly you're provided with treasury and capital management reports, which will show how the overall performance of the assets that we've got that are aligned to this framework are performing. And you as a shadow portfolio holder are aware of those discussions. So I'd say that's first and foremost, that governance. But I think it would be very difficult to challenge the success of the strategy without seeing what it's actually delivering in terms of outcome. So if you are suggesting that there might be a review period for the strategy, I think that would be sensible. So as set out in the cover report, the original strategy hasn't been reviewed since 2015. So we might want to build in a timescale that says actually we'll review it in 5 years' time, leading into obviously the context of LGR. But I would suggest if there's a wider scrutiny of how is the strategy and the subsequent actions that we are taking performing, I think that's a separate topic entirely from what we've got this evening.
If I make just a couple of observations myself, actually, on the report, I thought the yield that actually was mentioned was quite optimistic, particularly in light of the current financial situation that we have. So that was just an observation, and huge reliance on the capacity of the Section 151 officer in terms of her ability, or their ability, to actually run and actually manage all the risks. These are just observations, perhaps, that you would like to get some clarification on that. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. As you would expect, I've got a lot of questions on this. Well, if I can just start by talking about exit strategies, which we have in here. Now, if I go to a bank and say I want to borrow so much money for the business, I provide a business plan and I provide a date which is my exit strategy date, to say when that will be crystallised and the business will come to an end or move on to a new stage. So exit strategies, we don't appear to have any to me, because it looks as though we've acquired assets on the basis that we would expect to continue to receive revenue from them forever and a day. When we look at the criteria for purchasing new assets, if I go out and buy a nice flash car and spend, I don't know, whatever it is, £5,000 on it. I don't know what a flash car costs. I've never bought one. But if I go and spend, all right, £10,000, is that more reasonable? If I spend 10 million on assets, the benefit to this council is 2 years' income, because after that period, that income will go to the new unitary. In order to get that 2 years' income, we are stopping ourselves from using money which we're putting into a capital value rather than putting back into our community, and that is our Huntingdonshire taxpayers' money. So come the end of the 2 years, the capital will go to the unitary, and we will have received for that 2 years' income. Now, those 2 years' income are mostly going to be absorbed by acquisition costs and setup costs and voids in getting tenants and various other aspects. So it's going to be pretty de minimis in that period. So why on earth would we acquire assets, certainly which are outside the district, and why would we acquire assets now at this point in time with LGR and its winged chariot behind us in 2 years' time? It just, to have a strategy which says that we would acquire more assets, we should be using those assets and in a way and disposing of those that are where we can, and ensuring that that money stays in Huntingdonshire. It's Huntingdonshire taxpayers' money, and it should stay where it belongs. Now, I know I'm going to be told that LGR prevents us from doing this, that, and t'other, But I can tell you there's no council in the country that isn't planning in that way. And certainly the experience of a previous reorganisation was that there was an absolute once assets have been transferred to a unitary authority, then Huntingdonshire councillors will not be in the majority on that authority. But we will be contributing tremendous amounts of assets that others will then say what happens to them. So why we would acquire new assets, I don't understand. In order to acquire these assets, as we discussed at the workshop, as interest rates have gone up in recent years, we've had to hold more money in cash in order to obtain the lower interest rates. So that money in cash has come from holding greater and greater amounts of SIL. And that SIL, we've now got 50 something odd million. I don't know what the figure is, but it's of that region or greater. So we're holding that SIL, which could be invested in projects such as finishing off the work in the parks, a lovely biodiverse net gain project, or other sort of similar things, so that the money stays in Huntingdonshire. Now I know that St Neots Urban District Council put money into the Riverside Park. It started the Riverside Park being built. It acquired the freehold of the swimming pool site, the old outdoor pool site. It acquired. It did widening of the river to drain Regatta Meadow in those times, rather than lose the money. So I think that we should be looking at more those sorts of projects and not be considering putting further money in there. Sorry, I'll just look if
So
there's...
is your question really about exit
So
strategy?
my question about this strategy is that the exit strategy really does need to say, well, the exit strategy is to get this money locked down in Huntingdonshire before LGR, and that's a tough task. And I can't see anything in this which is saying that we're not going to just let all that money that's been acquired, all those assets that have been acquired over the years, control of them and the value of them leave Huntingdonshire. And it really does concern me, because that's what's happened before and that's what will happen again, in my opinion.
Through yourself, Chair, I think it's going to be a bit of a double act, because there's some of that's very political and clearly not my space to be in, but some of it is from the professional space. So I think the first thing, Councillor Chapman, to recognise is this isn't saying there will definitely be further asset acquisitions. It's just setting the framework. It's, as I say, updating a strategy that hasn't been updated since 2015. So I think that's the starting point. The fact that we've got existing assets, what happens with those is ultimately a decision for members in conjunction with the Section 151 officer, looking at how those assets are performing in the cold, hard light of day. So, I do think it is correct for the strategy to be worded in the way it is in terms of how we're going to get out of it. I think there is a very valid point in a practical sense that if we were to go and buy an asset tomorrow, that the business case would need to consider LGR, and that is referenced in the cover report itself, in terms of saying any review and changes in property holding need to be considered against the strategy, but also the context of LGR. I don't want to comment on the political side of LGR and disaggregation of monies, etc., but the cold hard light of day is that the communities will still be here, even if the administrative boundaries change and the name of the council changes. The communities will still be there. And from an officer perspective, talking to colleagues as we have been doing that have gone through this exercise, as colleagues, we've got a duty to both this authority and whatever comes next, whatever decision is made. And I think that the final piece I'd just like to add before handing over to Councillor Comboy is in terms of SIL. We're very alive to the fact that SIL is sitting there. It's been collected as a result of development that's happened in Huntingdonshire based on our policy and procedure, and it is there for a particular purpose. That's why we went through the governance last year. That's given us a position. LGR has come to light, and you'll have seen on the forward work plan, there is one eye to that with the view of how do we look at our strategic SIL in the context of LGR. What I will say is, though, at this stage, that shouldn't be seen as a, blunt terms, fire sale, in effect, of saying let's get the money out the door, because actually that undermines the principle of why you've taken the money in the first place to deliver strategic infrastructure. If we want roundabouts, we want big road improvements, they take chunky sums of money. We can chip away at that by giving £1 million here or £1 million there, but actually then you lose the strategic impact of having a SIL pot, which is the reason it was established in the first place. So I don't want to go any more on that, and I'll probably hand over to Councillor Conboy in terms of the political points and how the strategy is intended to be used.
Thank you very much, Mike. Councillor Chapman, I think the angst that you've articulated is something that we all have. And actually, if you asked our partner organisations who are also looking at this alongside us, because we may be merged, I think we all have the same angst. We want to do the best for the communities that we represent, and they are first and foremost in our minds in all of our decision making. I can tell you that there will be parts of this process in terms of local government reorganisation that we are aware there will come points where we will not be able to dispose of assets or make particular financial decisions without higher level authority from government. That's because they have learnt from previous iterations where it would be very easy for an organisation to potentially strip out the valuable assets that actually earn the income to make the new organisation financially viable. And so there's a real balance here, because actually if the new organisation isn't financially viable, that fails our residents. And actually that's the bit that some of us are really, really genuinely worrying about, because actually it has to stand on its own 2 feet as a new unitary. Now that means that all the partners going into that really need to be in the best financial position possible, because that benefits all the residents that find themselves reorganised into that new unitary. Certainly from our point of view, we are incredibly mindful that this is based on income that's been generated in Huntingdonshire, has been invested for the benefit of Huntingdonshire residents. I'm sure if you asked my counterparts in the cities, they would say the same about any revenue that they've earned. But certainly it is something we are really mindful of. We are looking at what we can and might be able to do that benefits Huntingdonshire and is right and proper. Bearing in mind, I've also got a 151 officer who quite rightly is directly accountable to bits of government, because there is an expectation that we actually have due process around our financial decisions. And actually, whilst she is our 151 officer, she is also beholden to make sure that we follow that set of requirements. So I am mindful of it. We are mindful as Cabinet, our officers are mindful of our angst. In the meantime, actually the income we generate from this activity is fundamental to underpinning our current budget. And we have work to do. Business as usual continues. The corporate plan continues. We'll have a new administration in May, even if it's all the same ones of us that come back. That new administration needs to be in the best place possible to deliver for residents. And so actually, and it will do that for the coming 2 years. So I hope that reassures you. We are mindful. We do understand that angst. I personally feel it. And we are going to be doing all we can to make sure that we are putting Huntingdonshire in the best place possible, but also making sure the future authority genuinely has every opportunity to succeed. And for those of you who are worried that we will be the smaller partner, if you actually look at our population and you look at it doesn't matter who we partner, actually we are not the small partner. By population and representation that we should expect to have around the table, we are a significant partner, and anybody who gets Hunts should be really grateful to get us because of what we bring to the table. That's in the narrative, Councillor Taylor, and you are going to hear me say that frequently and often, because I genuinely believe it, and I can see from the nods around the table, so do you.
Thank you. Very quick, very quick.
I mean, I was very, very concerned when I heard that we were holding SIL as a cash asset in order to get the lower interest rates when the interest rates went up. The Priory Centre work, for example, we've gone from about 5 million cost for the, I don't know if this is part 2 or not, but five, yeah, it might be. We've gone from a cost which has risen and risen, and we've now got another council being asked to make a contribution of their SIL. When, sorry, I can't go over that one. But anyway, construction costs are rising, particularly on infrastructure projects. So if we hold SIL and on low interest rates, which don't actually get added to SIL anyway, but if we hold that SIL in order to enable us to get finance for the CIS, then what we're actually doing is we're watching the depreciation of SIL, the amount of infrastructure it can provide, in order to hold these commercial investment properties. I don't know if that's clear or not. But the longer we hold SIL, the less buying power it has. So if we're holding SIL in order to get interest rates, then that's depreciating, and that is actually accounts for more money than we receive in the revenue, which is shown as a forecast on here. So although one comes in as revenue and the other one is capital depreciation, the capital depreciation on the SIL that we're holding is greater than the revenue that we're receiving.
Thank you. Mike or Sarah, did you?
I'm happy to come in briefly. Councillor Chapman, you were a bit close in terms of commercial sensitivity, so I think we need to note that, and I don't want to go into that. And I think your recollection or your understanding of what we might have agreed and how, so I don't want to pick that up now. But I will pick up with you outside of the meeting. I don't think the way that you've articulated around the SIL is quite my understanding, but I do take your point. The cost of things go up, that they also go down, but at the moment we are in a position that, particularly assets where we have to build something, buy something, some of that is more expensive than it has ever been. But equally, the markets do change. So I take your point, and I think all of us are genuinely worried that that SIL has to have the best impact it possibly can do. And it has to make a real difference in communities. It's hard fought for in the sense of, we shouldn't be complacent about it. And I think that's probably the point you were trying to make. Actually, we want it to have the benefit in St Neots. We want it to benefit Sven Stanton. We want it to benefit Houghton and Whitton. We want it to benefit every community. And equally, Mike's alluded to some of the very strategic stuff that actually sometimes we can do across a bigger geography that benefits a much wider cohort. So I take your point about spending it wisely and spending it probably as a priority, probably with LGR in mind. I suspect our fellow councils are also thinking that some SIL will need to be there for a new authority. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I just want to reassure you that, we are sharing the same angst. We want the impact in communities, and we want our communities to be confident that the impact that they've had of growth, that actually we are able to counter some of that growth by the reinvestment of SIL in our communities. So I take your point. I think it's well made, although I do have some issues around some of the technical bits, but I hope that answers and gives you the reassurance that we're on the same page about that angst.
Thank you, Councillor Conroy. Obviously, this conversation could go on for some time, so I think any further issues perhaps we can take offline. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just coming back to the strategy. Broadly, this reconfirms the previous strategy. There's one or two tweaks, which I think you could say are minor tweaks, but could have a large impact on the outcomes. Now, it's my understanding that when the commercial investment strategy was put forward, that it was there to increase revenue within the council, try and bring some revenue money into the council so we don't have to cut services, so we don't have to increase charges, so we don't have to increase council tax. Obviously, that was before the last election. And the benefits that residents have seen from that are quite clear in the table. Last year, there was a £3 million income from the commercial investment strategy that otherwise we would have had to have found cuts in services or raised fees and charges or found other ways of making that money back. But my concern is that at the moment, the current strategy as it sits, the one from 2015, it focuses on income generation, which is also what SIPFA require us to do. You know, SIPFA have 3 points that any investment must follow. It's got to focus on security, liquidity, and then yield. The current strategy does that. My concern is that the new strategy that's in front of us doesn't quite do that as well. So as much as I accept that, yes, we want to be investing in Huntingdonshire, if we're going to get more money by investing outside of Huntingdonshire, that is what this strategy is for. It's to get as much money as possible that we can then spend on our services, that we can then spend and invest in our area. Without that, we wouldn't be able to make those investments. So as much as I said, I do agree that we should be investing in Huntingdonshire. This strategy isn't for investing in Huntingdonshire. The benefit is that we don't have to increase our charges, make cuts, etc. So when we talk about opportunities of economic growth, what is the yield that we can make from economic growth that can be decided from day one? Because I appreciate, yes, if we build a load of industrial units in Huntingdonshire, yes, we're going to get a business rates. We don't know how much business rates we're going to get because the government are continually trying to say they're going to change how much we get. But actually, if we build a unit and rent it out, we know how much income we are likely to get, but also we know that hopefully, you know, touch wood, it's an appreciating value, an appreciating asset as well. So if we do decide to then exit, we've hopefully earned more on the capital side as well. So I do have concerns that we're talking about economic growth, we're talking about asset optimization, sustainability and social values. How can we squeeze as much money out of those items where we can squeeze that amount of money out of putting it in money markets, investing it in other ways, whether it's buying assets or something else. So my concern is that this strategy is heading in the right direction. It kind of knows what it wants to do, but it's being distracted by all these other nice things, which is for a different strategy and not for this strategy.
I'll try and answer that, Chair. I'm looking at you slightly puzzled because I don't think it quite says that. I think actually it still says that actually our prime goal is the income generation. You know, yes, you will have heard around this chamber lots and lots of times about we're all really, really passionate about investing in hunts, but the prime thing is it has to be optimising that income generation. Now, if that happens to be in hunts and that's the best opportunity, fantastic. If it isn't in hunts and it's the best opportunity, then we need to be hard-nosed and looking at it because we will use that income generation in hunts, but the investment might sit somewhere else. And that's always a real challenge for us, isn't it? It's a real conundrum. Ideally, everything would be on your doorstep and you'd be able to do it all here. But actually, if you remember, a lot of the work we do around the investment strategy, and you'll know much better than I do, because it wasn't something I was involved directly in over the last 12 years that I've been a councillor on this council. But, you know, I remember the difficulties when things happen in an area that are entirely unforeseen at a given time. So Somerset Levels flooding. If you've invested everything in the Somerset Levels and you are the Somerset Levels Council, that's pretty disastrous in terms of your portfolio. Actually, having a spread portfolio can be really, really helpful, just in real practical terms. So our officer corps work really, really hard with the advice that they come back to us with every time, and you'll know this firsthand from your experiences. When we are looking at those investments, you know, there is a huge amount of thought and due diligence work going into that advice that comes forward to say, you know, these are the risks, these are the advantages, this is the recommendations and why you might like to consider this over something else. So sometimes the real challenge for us is we sit in this room and there are things that we really, really value locally and we would really like to invest in, but that's why Mike alluded to the fact that sometimes we have other mechanisms for that investment, which is not this one. This one is about income generation to enable us to spend back in hunts, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we always buy the investment in hunts. There are other things that we can use as mechanisms to buy and invest in hunts if we think it's the right thing. This one is the hard nose. It brings in the money. We can then use that money for the benefit of our residents, which I think is, you know, that's where the first guiding principle was. That's what we're still trying to stay with. We're not trying to move a million miles from that. Now, Mike might tell me I've got that wrong because this is not my portfolio expertise, but I think I'm okay. I don't think I've deviated, Mike.
I was just going to simplify it even further. So remembering the bottom end of the strategy at the end of section 7, it says must satisfy revenue generation plus one other investment activity. So we've been very clear of this point, knowing how members can be distracted, let's say, by other objectives and other strategy things that are there. Simply, you could have a scheme that it's revenue generating and the risk level, when you utilise the definition of risk management, aligns with our risk appetite, governance frameworks, and long-term financial sustainability. So again, exactly that point. You could simplify it right down and say, this is a good investment for the council because it's going to generate great returns for us that we can invest in services, and it fits with our risk profile. And it could be anywhere in the country. So the strategy enables that simple conversation to be had. But if there is a more complex conversation about actually there's a commercial opportunity in the locality, that's where the other factors will then be dragged into that, which are more specific as set out at section 5, where they are talking about local businesses, council-owned assets. And I'm not going to go into too much on the sustainability and social value, but those are something that are common across investment portfolios now. So hopefully that gives you the clarity and confidence, Councillor Martin.
Follow up? Okay.
No, perfect. That does put me at ease somewhat, and obviously we'll see how it goes, and there'll no doubt be a review. The one assurance that I would like to get is that we're not going to see money from the commercial investment strategy to be used for what is commonly known in local government as invest to save. Because as much as I'm sure all of HDC's buildings would benefit from solar panels, it isn't the revenue generating that we would probably like to see for such a strategy. But this strategy, as I read it, does open it up to invest to save, which isn't, as far as I'm concerned, what this strategy should be about.
If I can, because obviously you're looking for an assurance from me, I can't assure you what a new administration will do, because this will live into a new administration. Who knows, you might be sat in my shoes and it might be your decision to make. I think the bit that we are all incredibly mindful of is we have to be financially viable as an organisation, because if we're not financially viable, we cannot deliver the services. And actually, that's what the residents need. Now, we might sometimes disagree about which services and quite how we're going to do that, but this element is built into all of the budget assumptions. Those budget assumptions rely on us continuing to have an investment strategy that brings in a yield. If it exceeds that yield, fabulous. If it underperforms, that's a real problem. So actually, all the decisions we make have to be about the figures. Yes, we're worrying about all those other things. So are we going to suddenly go into social value? Well, actually, if it's stacked up and the figures all worked, and actually the advice from officers is actually it will do all of the things you want and more, you'd consider it. But actually, it may not. In which case, the bottom line is if it doesn't end up giving us the revenue that we need in order for the services that we need in Huntingdonshire, we will not be doing it. So hopefully it gives any administration coming forward the flexibility that they may want and need. But the hard-nosed bit is it has to generate the income at the level that we've anticipated in order for this council to be able to deliver the quality of services it already wishes to do, and a new administration will want and need to do. And that's got to be front and foremost in our decision-making. Sometimes that means we have to make decisions based on financial outcomes, and sometimes that will be hard decisions about things we'd love to do, but the money doesn't stack up. So I hope that gives you the reassurance, and it will be incumbent on a new administration come May to actually make this really work. So hopefully it gives enough flexibility, but it is keeping front and centre. It must generate the income.
Councillor Catman.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's been absolutely fascinating listening to this, because I think I now know what our strategy is. Possibly. I read this document and my initial conclusion was that a colleague of mine who used to have a great expression for documents, he said the document is content free. And I read this document and thought it's content free. Now I've now realised there's 2 lines at the bottom of what is now page 453, which is the content. but I didn't spot it. Because when I read the section on strategy, it didn't say it. And when I read the rest of it, it didn't say it. There's 2 lines that are our strategy. So it isn't content free. It's got content in it. It's just, I'm going to be rude here, bloody difficult to find. And through this conversation, I finally worked out what the content is. So if this document goes forward, can we bring the content out? The strategy section in the strategy is irrelevant. There's a bit about risk, and the poor S151 officer is going to do everything, which I'm worried about because I think it's a huge workload. But our strategy should be brought out and made clear.
Thank you for the observation. Interestingly, one of the issues that I identified was the delegated authority and the process for delegating. And again, it comes back to the management of the risk and the risk process. And obviously, because you're delegating to your 151 officer, and then I think it's chief exec and leader of the council, etc. So of course, but obviously it's all about your skill sets and how you can actually manage that. So perhaps you need a feedback look and much more of a tighter process on that. That was just an observation that I picked up on that one. But sorry, Mike.
If I may just come back on that, that's reflective of our existing constitution. So that's where I come back to. You can't read this document in isolation. We've got that other process, so that's why.
Helpful. Maybe we need to look at some of those risks. Are there any other questions on this report before we move on? Okay, thank you, Sarah, for a contribution, and Mike, thank you on that. So we'll return to the agenda. Corporate performance report. Councillor Ferguson, lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you, Chair. Thank you very much. Councillor Catmull will be relieved to hear that this report is anything but content-free. It's always rather an odd one because we're reporting the performance at the end of Q1, which feels like we're close to the end of Q2. So you're going to have to cast your minds back to before your summer holidays in June to see how we were doing back then. It's also the first report of the new financial year, which means that we haven't accumulated much negative performance on the metrics, and so lots of things are green at the moment, so it's a good one for me to report. Having said that, I was very much encouraged by the positive performance on PI3 and PI4, which of course are always bugbears. They're to do with the provision of disability facility grant, which is a topic very dear to my heart, especially as a councillor and as the portfolio holder. We haven't done very well on those during the entire administration, but they're both significantly outperforming the Q1 performance for the past 2 years. So PI3 is currently green, PI4 is amber. They're both projected to have an outturn of amber, so it means there's still much more work to be done, but I'm very reassured to see those finally moving in the right direction. On a less positive note, I think of quite great concern to me is PI11, which is to do with the number of affordable houses we delivered. Now, we were never going to meet last year's record total, but the PI11 shows that not only did we not meet our objectives in Q1, that we have like a stockpile of housing going to be delivered in Q4, I think 40% of the total, which is a big risk. Now, a consequence of that you can see in PI7, which is the number of homelessness we prevented, and PI8, the number of households housed through HomeLink, both of which are critical objectives for us and both of which dipped into the red during Q1. Now, I think, I've presented these numbers for 3 years now, and I think I've warned, John Collin always warns me that our, I think, rather excellent performance in preventing homelessness is down, obviously, to the hard work of officers, but is also very vulnerable to this problems with the delivery of affordable houses, because that's how we move people out of the homelessness cycle and get them, into living into proper permanent homes. So it would be easy for us to sit here and say that,
well, we don't have that much influence over the number of affordable houses delivered. But if you look at the corporate plan objectives, 14, 20, 21, 24 and 27 speak to the prevention of homelessness and also to influencing the number of social and affordable houses built. And I think, when we talk about do enable influence, I think we have to use our influence here to encourage house builders to meet their targets, but also to be honest with us about what the forward pipeline looks, because the consequences of that drying up further, I think, can be quite serious. So, part of the reason we do these reports is to highlight those kind of amber and red lights, and I think for me that's the most significant one I've seen in this report. So, pass it on to you. Would you like to add anything? No. So, pass it back to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. As ever, thank you. I open the floor for Councillor Catmer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the team for producing a version I can read. I know it now means there are two versions, which is initially confusing until you read this, because there's the colour version and the James version. But thank you very much for that. Did have one comment on PI 10. Because the current status is red and it says the projected outturn is green, but in the text it says it's unclear how we will achieve that. So I was surprised if we're unclear how we're going to go from red to green, why we are so clear we're going to go to green.
I can answer. I think that this is due to a problem, a national problem. I'm not sure. The Valuations Office, I think, changed their council tax system, which has caused delays in providing the council tax bandings, and I think we're optimistic that those will be resolved. And I think there's not an issue with number of properties coming through. There's just a backlog of valuations, which is down to a national database issue, which hopefully will be resolved in the next 3 quarters, and which will put us back on target, I think, is the answer to that one.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Ferguson, for the report. I raised missed bins every quarter last year. You'll be pleased I'm not going to raise missed bins this time. And I think it's very welcome, actually, that there's been a 12% improvement on missed bins since this time last year. I think that also just goes to show that it's worth keeping those challenging targets in there rather than softening them up. My question is actually also on PI 10, like Councillor Catmer. And really, it's more about the fact, I'm interested to know, what are the actual implications to the council of all these properties not having council tax banding? Particularly when you say that the oldest is from November 2024, that's, it's 10 months now. Does that mean that there's 10 months uncollected council tax on that property? And is that multiplied over the however many we've got, 356 properties that haven't got bandings yet? Does that mean that we're missing out on that council tax? If so, do we then get it back retrospectively? And if that is the case, I think being landed with a bill for 6 months council tax is probably going to put a lot of residents in a sticky situation.
I'm trying to recall a conversation I had with Katie Kelly, who's in charge of Revs and Bends, about this. But I think the situation is that we provide an estimated banding, and so people will get their council tax bills. Now that can still be inconvenient if you suddenly get the wrong council tax bill, and suddenly you're going to ultimately have to pay that money back. But I don't think it's going to affect us long term. I would imagine that the team are quite skilled in deciding those temporary bandings, but it is a concern, yes, of course. And anything that means that people's council tax goes up and down every month is going to be a great concern. So I'll ask Katie about that, and I'll get back to you with the actual answer. But I think the answer is we're able to give an estimated banding, and that people still continue paying their council tax.
Are there any other questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it. I'm just looking at the civil parking enforcement across the district. Obviously, this is back then, so I'm just bringing it forward. That I'm really pleased that the civil parking enforcement has been implemented, and the live penalty charge notices will take effect this month. So after the 4 weeks warning period, we will now be going live with fines, with penalty charge notices. However, it's probably not for yourself, Councillor Ferguson, I have got, and it is probably too early for a review, but I am slightly nervous that we do not have enough enforcers to cover the district. I know this was previously my portfolio. I think this is something that maybe the panel we could review at some time, have this brought back to us, because I am still seeing illegal parking. I don't know if anyone else has seen this. At first it was, oh great, and now it's still happening. There's still hotspots in St Neots. I don't know if anyone else is, seeing it elsewhere in their towns and parishes. They're doing a great job. They're doing a fantastic job, the enforcers. I stopped and spoke to two of them, and they were doing brilliant, and they've got some really good praises, and people are really happy they're out there. But I do worry that we haven't got enough. So I'm just going to leave that one there. So sorry, Councillor Ferguson, I don't think this is for you, but since it's part of our performance. The other one also is this is really, really positive. The street cleaning team have exceeded their target every month this quarter, and it's 28% lower than the same period last year. So that's brilliant. So I just want to praise the street cleaning team. However, I do want to encourage residents to carry on reporting any litter or road curb side cleaning, which is available for them to report on the HDC reporting system on their website. They can do that if they can see any areas that need cleaning up, or the curbsides need cleaning. That is there for them to do. So that would be brilliant if our residents can continue to do that. And just one more, if I may, Chair, which is page 111. So this is the 12 act on opportunities for early intervention and regularly report on learning and impact. So the working has begun between the REI and the CAB to ensure in single approach that customers tell their stories once, and that's really great, absolutely brilliant. I just want to ask though, since St Neots have now got after many years, I think decades, when our CAB was taken away, we have now got a CAB in Amesbury, St Neots, and they are open Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I want to know whether we are working with the St Neots crew in the CAB. So if we could find that out, that would be brilliant.
I'm sure we could find that out. I don't have any information myself on the civil parking enforcement. Yeah, I also welcome it. Welcome seeing lots of parking tickets where I live on Love's Farm this week, which has been a great relief to many residents. But I think that the best time to judge that performance is when we have data, and rather than speculating now. So when we have the data, we can have that conversation, and I'll pass your comments on to the portfolio holder. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. Glad to hear Councillor Taylor wanting to see parking coming to ONS. I have lost count on how many times I've asked for parking to come to ONS, so I'm now glad that somebody is agreeing with me. So thank you very much for that. Just potentially a couple that I wanted to raise. The big one for me is PI 23, which is a percentage of sampled areas which are clean or predominantly clean of litter, debris, graffiti, fly posting, etc. It says that for the first 3 months of this financial year, it's been 100%. So we're saying that it's absolutely spotless. So I'm starting to wonder where the team is looking to sample that, because as much as I agree that we walk around Huntingdonshire and by and large it is a very nice area and there isn't a huge amount of debris lying around and graffiti, etc. But there is still a large swathe of our district that does suffer with litter. You know, we have litter groups across the whole of Huntingdonshire. If this is true, we wouldn't need any of the litter picking groups that we have in Huntingdonshire. So I've asked it before, haven't really had an answer. Can we get an idea on where the team are looking so we can work out how this is showing as 100%. Because I accept if it's 90%, 95%, 98%, I can kind of accept that because that's believable. But by saying that the district is completely clear of all litter and all graffiti and all fly posting is not something that anyone in this room can believe.
So I think with your permission, Chair, we'll try and bring that to the next ONS, which is only a month away, isn't it? We'll probably be back here. So we'll try and get a quick turnaround with you. It does say in the report that we had 208 inspections across 16 parishes, which sounds like me that it's statistically significant, but I also share your scepticism, Councillor Martin. That's a very high score, and it doesn't meet my observations about, despite the great work that we do in trying to combat these things, they are rather pernicious sometimes, and so I'd probably expect to see not 100%, but we'll get an answer for you at the next meeting.
If I may, since it was previous my portfolio, they're done at random. So absolutely, that it could be. We're not going to be 100%. They're picked at random. So the areas that are inspected are very random. They don't know where they're going to do it. So, and as you say, Councillor Martin, litter picking groups are invaluable. That they are there on top of the litter constantly. So, and litter is. How should I say this without? Well, no, I'm going to say it. I'm going to be blunt. We should be educating, our children in schools as we bring them up to respect our land and not to be dropping litter. And that's how we, our community groups continuously are picking up. This litter will continue. They'll pick it up and you'll start again. It's like painting a bridge, isn't it? So, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we should see some more data on that, but it is a random pick of looking at where the litter lays and how good it is. I don't think I explained that very well at all, but we'll get some.
I think what Councillor Martin asked us for is we'd like to understand the methodology a bit more. I think would be. I mean, we accept that it's random, but the methodology and how those assessments made. So that would be a really good and interesting report for me and for the panel, I think.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tevlin.
Thanks, Chair. And just picking up on Councillor Taylor's point about CPE, as portfolio holder for resident services, from that perspective, it would be really good, especially bringing up to the next scrutiny session around CPE and the feedback from our residents and customers on it, sort of tracking progress through the customer services side of things, how they are feeding back from the whole CPE enforcement. It would be good to get the feedback from the residents on the front line. Thank you.
I think Mr. Sleeves would like to comment on that.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. The latest update is literally we're only sort of 5 weeks into the process, so we are issuing fines this week for the first week after 4 weeks of notice. Members will recall the all-member briefing session that was given by George and the team in the lead up to this, which did say we need time for this to bed in. We need to capture the data. We're somewhere between 3 and 6 months before we can start to really assess behavioural change. Have we got the right resources? Where do we need to target further? All of that sort of stuff. So it's built into the project plan. Implementation of CPE didn't just stop once we got to that stage. It doesn't just stop now we've got to the fines. There is that bit over the next bit as we embed it into BAU. So it's very much part of George's programme to bring that through. And you'll see on the work programme as well that we discussed earlier, under topics identified for further consideration for the other panel, it's highlighted there, to come forward at the right time. So please do take assurance from the fact that from an officer perspective, that scrutiny is there. But equally as well, George does want to bring through an update in the all-member sense, just to say actually how this is all bedding in.
Councillor Ferguson.
So in my portfolio area, Michelle Greet is in charge of customer services, and I have a regular briefing with her. And if there is any angst from our residents, I will get it in the next straight from Michelle, I'm sure. I will say that as with the green bin charges, she anticipated this about a year ahead of time, and so they are anticipating an increase in number of calls, and I think they've rearranged their resources to account for that. And I'd be interesting to hear how the first weeks have gone, and if there is any angst from residents being reported over the phone lines.
Thank follow up, Simone. Right.
Thank you, Chair. Be very quick. So regarding CPE, we were told that we were going to have a way of reporting our hotspots within our towns and parishes. I'm not quite sure how to do that. I know it's not your portfolio, Councillor Ferguson, but if officers could give us some information about hotspot reporting, that'd be great.
Thank you. I'm sure that's very helpful. I'm sure Councillor Ferguson will take that away. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a very quick question, Councillor Ferguson, with regard to PI 23. With regard, we said we've got 16 parishes. I would like to know which 16 parishes you've been doing that in and the types of sites that you've been inspecting, because I'm sure we could all come up with other sites and what have you, that perhaps it would, if we knew that information, it would just help to make that sort of report that much better. And I think there are other ones on the same sort of line where we could perhaps get a bit more information, you know, like where you say in under 24 that we found 7 garden waste fly tips, but where? You know, it would just be useful to give us a bit more clarity on certain items, if that is possible. Thank you, Chair.
I would agree. I think it's context and methodology, so we'll try and report back on those things at the next meeting.
Thank you. Councillor McAdam.
Thank you. Just a very quick observation, backtrack a little bit to litter. I used to run a Facebook group called Rubbish Rebels, and we used to go out and litter pick quite regularly, and we talk about educating children. I'm thinking about educating businesses to, you know, cut back on their waste. What we observed was that there was tons of litter inside business premises, and they just didn't seem to care about it at all. And one example is you walk up from near my house and you go up beside Lidl, and there's a fence there, and it's just jam-packed with rubbish and litter on the other side, and you sort of think, do these people actually care? That's just my comment. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Can you confirm whether or not, when it says there's no graffiti or whatever, my understanding is that the council only removes graffiti which is regarded as obscene. Otherwise, someone's missed all of the graffiti on the side of the town bridge in St Neots that's been there for a year or more. So I think it's just obscene graffiti that's removed, and I don't think district removes other graffiti. Do you know, Councillor Ferguson?
It's somewhere outside my areas of expertise, but I think when we bring this back, we'll ask the portfolio holder to, or whoever's in charge of reporting back, to comment on graffiti removal. But I would say that the PI 23 is to do with observations rather than removal. But I guess if you don't remove it, then the observations will go up too. So it's linked.
I presume that the litter surveys needed to be tied in with not the day after the litter pick rota, because as someone who does regular litter picks, I know that if I do one on certain days, it will be clear, and if I do one on other days, it won't be clear because it's not their day until tomorrow. So it's all a little bit hit and miss, and I think that perhaps it's a little bit skewed because of the day of the week that the survey's been done. St Neots Market Square is a free car park at the moment. You know, we've done all that work to provide a free car park. is that going to be covered by CPE at any time, do you know? Or because the Transport Regulation Orders remove the pedestrianisation of the Market Square car park.
Chair,
Is
can
that
we
just-
keep this to the content of the report? I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm not knowledgeable on all aspects of the council performance. So I have no idea. It's not covered in the report. And okay, Councillor Gardner's egging me on. I don't think that Market
Forgive
Square
me,
is a car
Councillor
park. I pass it
Ferguson.
regularly. I don't see cars there at all. So I'm surprised by that. But
Oh no, there are
so-
and lots of motorbikes.
Gentlemen,
They're not cars.
Thank you. Thank you for the intervention. We will try and keep this to the content of the report. I think that you've been very kind, and you've said that you'll go away and you'll find particular reports that got there. So thank you for that. I have a question for Councillor Martin.
You'll be relieved, Councillor Ferguson, it's to do with the report. So PI 19, so percentage of household waste reused, recycled and composted, currently showing as red, says the prediction is green. Obviously, we've had a very hot, warm summer with very little rain. Concerned that isn't going to get into amber, let alone green. Again, I think this is another one where it'd be useful to have a bigger breakdown of information and giving us, because the explanation is that because it's been drier than expected, the amount of garden waste recycled or composted has reduced, but we don't have any quantitative data that shows that that's the case, because it may actually be that dry recycling has gone down just as much, which is a different concern that we need to think about. So one is that, are we actually going to get to green? And the second one is, can we get a bit more data on how that is broken down on a year-to-date basis based on last year?
So, Councillor, you're asking for maybe the split between the blue bin recycling and the green bin composting, which I think is a sensible observation. I agree.
Thank you. Councillor Cat.
Thank you, Chair. Just a little thought on presentation again, because that's what I like looking at. On some graphs, going up is good, and some graphs going down is good. Now, you can read it because there's little letters on there that say G, and you say, oh, that's one where going down is good. It might just be a nice idea for, I don't know how many members of the public ever read this, but just to have a little graphic on the side that says, on this graph, being up is good, on this graph, being down is good. And on one graph, I found one where being not in the middle is good, both up and down.
Again, I think that's a sensible observation. Sorry, Chair. I think that we could do that with text, couldn't we? And say which direction is good is measured in. Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. This is on the work with health and social care providers, which is exploring the future model of housing support and care, enabling people to live independently for longer. The progress update at Q1 is the housing profiles are now available on specialist housing needs in the district, which informs our discussion on housing sites being brought forward by developers and housing associations. The new housing needs assessment and housing strategy will further advance the data held. I personally don't know a lot about this. I'm presuming this is work that we collaborate with Cambridgeshire County Council, because I know that they have the specialist housing as well. I would like to find out more about this. There is a family in Amesbury, St Neots, that my husband, Councillor Ian Taylor, has been working with very closely. I think it's near enough up to a year. They are desperate to get a specialist house for their family. And Places for People and HDC are working closely, but I feel it's just not happening for this family. So I would like to understand more about this outcomes and see whether this can help the family working with HDC and for places for people as well.
Sorry, is there the general question was concerning just an update?
Yeah, I'd like to know whether. Sorry, Chair, I would like to know whether this. So we're looking at progress update on working with health and social care providers to explore future modelling for houses. Sorry, I maybe didn't explain it. So that the family in Amesbury, St Neots, are desperate for a house that is fit for their family because they have two disabled, very complex needs with their daughters, and they are getting nowhere fast. The house that they live in now is not fit for purpose, and I need to know whether this project can help them or not. So if officers can take that away and see whether we can explore bringing this into the mix with Places for People and HDC, because at the moment we're not getting any further. I'm sorry that I've hijacked that, but it's very important because this has been going on for far too long.
I'm not, Mike, did you?
Councillor Taylor, I'm fully aware of the case in question because I actually did the response to your husband over this particular matter. There are various teams involved in this particular case, but this is one of those areas where our ability to action it is very, very limited, and it falls into the influence category. And I think you are conflating what is one particular case, and I do agree it's important and for all the reasons you've set out, but it is one particular case. The PI that we have there under that point is looking at how we work in terms of our partners within the wider system, and that's why you'll see reference in the middle box around active lifestyles, the Work Well programme. Those are big strategic interventions that impact on a number of different people. As always, we will here to try and help individual cases where we can, but I believe we've got to take that, we've got to elevate that from where we are here, and happy to pick up offline further, but we've provided a detailed response in the officer space on that.
Thank you for that, Mike. Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. Again, so picking up on Councillor Taylor's point, I also, from my residents' perspective, have had various complaints about Places for People, and so again, raising concern around the providers for our social housing, for that to be evaluated would be really good in terms of the reporting, and for them to be held accountable would be really good. My point that I was trying to raise also is to do with waste and household waste. So I know this is also to do with the other overview and scrutiny, but is there any indication from this side and your report with regards to the rolling out of the food subscription service as well, how that is also going to tie into your reporting and outlook? Thank you.
The weekly food waste collections won't be rolled out until Q1 next year, and I'm sure we will consider. I'm sure you will encourage me to consider that as a metric to be measured going forward. But that's definitely for next year and not for this year, if we're still around.
Can I just come back on that, because the communications are already going out, aren't they? So I'd like to know a bit more in terms of also the comms strategy going forward with this. Though it's next year, it's already happening, isn't it, in terms of comms?
So I acknowledge that, but the purpose of this report is to track performance and not to talk about communication. So I think those questions will be better raised with the portfolio holder than with me.
Thank you for that. I think it's Sam Wakeford actually for housing, and Pamela Scott. If there are no other questions on performance, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Now we have item 8, which is the local government framework. I'm very conscious. No? Do you want to sit? Local government outcomes framework. I'm very conscious of the time. in terms of if there are lots of questions, and I'm happy to either look at this report or we can perhaps look at deferring to next month. Councillor Ferguson.
Chair, I think that this report is, I think we have to provide our feedback on this proposal, I think the 22nd of this month, and the final feedback, I think by the 28th of November, is it, October? But we have, it has to be done now, I think, Chair.
Okay, well, there we are. I open the floor. Councillor Jen.
Well, if I might make an observation that might be helpful for your thing, I think there are two parts to this report. There's the very interesting part, which is looking at all of the different metrics and how we stack up against other councils. But I think that's outside the remit of this response. So if I might urge my fellow panel members to keep their responses purely to the response that has to go in at the end of this month, then we might get a chance to look at the report itself and the interesting comparisons with our neighbouring authorities at some other point.
Councillor Ferguson.
Can I just say to Councillor Jennings that one of the government's objectives of this is to avoid punitive comparisons by focusing on learning and improvement rather than league tables. But being born in the 1970s, we like a bit of punitive, don't we? Encouragement, a bit of competition. So I'd agree with him. That is the fun bit, but it's up to you. But I don't think this is probably the place for it now. No.
Right.
We'll do that next time.
We'll do that next time. Okay. Well, I open the floor then, and would ask members to bear in mind what's been said and try and be brief with our questioning. Thank you. Are there no questions? Oh, Councillor Catt.
It isn't really a question. Thank you, Chair. It isn't really a question, but we're quite good at having some leading indicators, and I don't think in our response I really felt it was pulling out enough around, because a lot of what the government is asking for are lagging indicators. And I think in our response, the response looks fine, but I think we should be maybe saying, let's emphasize how good we are by telling them do some leading indicators where you're missing them.
Comment?
I'd agree, yes.
Okay. Right. Well, that's fine. Are there any other questions on this report?
Chair, I'd just like to think that Councillor Martin will be pleased to add to his 5 journeys and umpteen pathways. He now has 15 local government priority outcomes, so quite exciting times.
Too much fun going on here tonight. Come on. Seriously, are there any? Councillor Blackwell.
Yes, and I am going to keep it brief, but I just felt with the data provided, benchmarking HDC, there were omissions, there were duplications of the comparisons. I just felt that we had a whole lot of information sort of given to us that probably could have been streamlined a lot more. I'm talking about all these items, page 350, and no values stated. And I just felt that we were delivered sort of tricky reports to read and understand.
So I think we can all agree that this is a worthwhile effort, but it does make it very complicated to understand the data. And I think the issue with all taxonomies, and as we said, journeys, pathways, priorities, that no taxonomy is perfect. They're all a bit arbitrary. And when you try and map them together, you're always going to have overlaps and omissions. And I think this has been a valiant effort to try and reduce those. But I think it's difficult to try and squeeze square pegs into round holes, or the other way around. I think so. So I think, yes, I agree, but I think this is a good effort, Mr. Sloper.
So the report really presents what the government is proposing, And we've also set out there that we already have contextual measures for the council, which were established in 2014. And there was a set of contextual measures that we used to inform Huntingdonshire Futures, the place strategy. So the performance team, so Steph and his team, are actually working on rationalising that into one indicator set, which will take account of the local government outcomes framework. So you're correct, Councillor, it does need to be rationalised. It is being rationalised, and that's being brought back to this committee so that you'll be able to make sure that those contextual measures are the things that you think are right, but they will have to include the log off, the final suggestions that they do in that framework, because they'll be set by government. So in answer to your question, yes, at the moment, we're just highlighting the fact that there are 3 different sets. The council has used those in the past, but yes, they do need to be rationalised, and that is work that's being brought back to this committee.
When is that? Obviously, it's a work in progress. Because
I
obviously
believe it's December.
Okay, because
Yeah,
it was
because they're
quite a
working on the
complicated-
performance framework first.
Okay, it was a
But I'll
complicated-
check and we'll confirm back to the committee.
Thank you for that, Neil. Are there any questions? Any further questions?
Sorry.
Yeah, no? No questions? Well, I'd like at this point, oh, sorry, Mike, my apologies.
For yourself, Chair. Members will have noted that we've skipped over item 7 in terms of planning enforcement. We've retracted that from the agenda due to some challenges we've got in that service area and such like. I just want to say to any of the members in the room, and it does go out to all members, if there are any particular challenges around planning enforcement or particular queries following on from the scrutiny that was done before, happy to pick those up offline, either directly through myself or directly through Clara and the team. The addendum is there in the papers that follows on from the report that was given earlier this year, but the offer stands.
Thank you. If that's the case and there are no further questions, I'd like to close the meeting and thank everybody for their time and contributions this evening as ever. Thank you.